Well, away from the front lines, back in Russia, there is damage of a different kind. The country's currency, the ruble, has fallen to a 17-month low against the dollar. Russia's central bank is stepping in to try and halt the slide, raising interest rates by 3.5%. So what's at play here, and what does it mean for Russia and the war in Ukraine? Joining me now to discuss is Russian economist and professor of economics at Sciences Po, Sergei Gureyev. Sergei, it's good to see you. So as noted, Russia's central bank has really stepped in here, raising rates in hopes of propping up this declining ruble. The country is dealing with ballooning deficits in its efforts to try to pay for this war, and it's seen a drop in export revenues. But, and there's a big but here, Russia's economy is still expected to grow, albeit slowly, but it hasn't contracted yet. And many analysts, including yourself, had predicted that at this point in the war, we would see that. So give us a sense of where Russia's economy stands right now.
Thank you very much, Bianna, for inviting me. Indeed, we finally see some effects of the sanctions that were announced about a year ago and introduced in December and February. As you rightly mentioned, the revenues Russian budget is getting from exporting oil and gas are hit. And in the first months of 2023, the Russian oil and gas revenues were down by half, which of course created a budget deficit, as you mentioned. Now, this is not a macroeconomic disaster or meltdown, but indeed it constrains the capacity of Russian government to finance military spending and also assure the support for the war. Mr. Putin, of course, says that this war is hugely popular and he has 80 or 90% Russian households supporting him and his war, but this is not the case, as we saw during Mr. Prigozhin's mutiny, that nobody spoke for Mr. Putin, nobody took it to the street to support Mr. Putin. And in that sense, we see how sanctions create tensions within Russia. As I said, there are many different dimensions of that. One of the things you mentioned, if you just look at top-line GDP numbers, they look better than Russian households would feel because, of course, GDP numbers during wartime also include military production. So whenever Russian industry produces a tank or a rocket or munition, it looks like it produces value added, but of course, this is something that is being destroyed in Ukraine in order to kill Ukrainians and destroy Ukrainian cities, and it does not add to quality of life of ordinary Russians. Their living standards have come down much more than GDP numbers would suggest.
We know that much of Russia's revenue comes from the sale of oil, and in hopes of not wanting to destabilize the global oil supply, but also not to see windfall profits for Russia, the leaders of the G7 came up with a price cap at $60 a barrel last year, and in hopes of retaining Russian revenue flow, but at the same time keeping prices relatively stable for the global market supply. That was recently breached, with oil revenue now at an 8-month high, and many accuse Russia as well as Saudi Arabia of tightening supplies in order to increase the price of oil. So are these efforts not as effective as they may have looked initially on paper?
It is true that the strategy undertaken by Saudi Arabia has contributed to higher oil prices. On the other hand, oil price cap seems to be working, and I strongly support this policy. I think this is a very innovative and bold strategy to reduce oil and gas revenues for the Russian budget. I think more has to be done, and there are several things that the Western coalition could have done in the months to come. One is actually to reduce oil price cap from 60 to say 55 or 50 to further tighten the impact of the oil price cap, and also to clamp down to intensify the fight against loopholes. You mentioned that other countries, not just Saudi Arabia, but third countries, help Russia to circumvent sanctions, both import of sensitive technology, but also circumventing the oil price cap constraints. So this has to be tightened. The West should work more on not just introducing sanctions, but enforcing them to limit the resources Russia has to continue this war.
Yeah, the circumventing largely done by way of China and India, specifically in terms of oil. I want to get you to respond to what Alex Gabuev, somebody who you know well, a Russia expert and director of the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center, wrote recently in a piece about Putin looking for a bigger war, in his view, and not for an off-ramp in Ukraine. And here's what he said. He wrote, "The Kremlin believes that it can afford a long war. The Russian economy is forecast to record modest growth this year, mostly thanks to military factories working around the clock. Critical components such as microchips needed for the defense industry are arriving from China and other sources. Despite sanctions, the Kremlin's war chest is still overflowing with cash thanks to windfall energy profits last year." So this is sort of summing up what you and I have already been discussing. And I think for the majority of viewers, a lot of them are sort of scratching their heads saying, wait a minute, we were talking about unprecedented sanctions leveled against Russia, virtually all big international Western companies having left Russia and stopped doing business there. And yet, from this point of view, it seems Putin is still doing rather well and can afford to keep this war going for much longer than many had expected. Would you agree with that sentiment?
So we don't really know because we don't know how much of yuan Putin has. For example, recent reporting suggested that he sold so much oil to India, but now he doesn't know what to do with $40 billion of rupees, worth of rupees. Rupees is not a convertible currency, so he doesn't know what to do with Indian currency stuck in Indian banks. And to what extent he has resources to continue this war for many more years, we don't really know. But so far, he seems to be confident. And yet, I would just make two arguments suggesting that sanctions are important. First, imagine the world without the sanctions, Bianna. If you think about the world where Putin has many more sources of revenue, if he continues to sell his oil and gas all over the world without oil price cap and European oil embargo, if he easily gets this technology, semiconductors, not just from China, but from Europe and Taiwan, that would be a very different outcome in the battlefield. And I think sanctions have already made an impact, making sure that Putin has not won this war. And the second thing I would mention is if you think about Mr. Prigozhin's mutiny, this mutiny actually originated from Mr. Prigozhin complaining that he doesn't get enough munitions to advance in the Ukrainian battlefield. And so those complaints and his mutiny eventually are an implication of sanctions. Sanctions limited Putin's ability to pay for the munitions and tanks and rockets, and second, to be able to produce those things. I think more has to be done, and here I fully agree with you and Alex. You need to close down the loopholes for circumventing the sanctions, including getting semiconductors from China.
Ironically, it's interesting you bring up that failed mutiny by Yevgeny Prigozhin, because it really took that failed mutiny to get Vladimir Putin to admit what most people already knew, and that is that Russia itself, the Russian military, was funding the Wagner Group, and it wasn't some independent mercenary group for plausible deniability's sake that the Kremlin had long said that it had been. You mentioned China, and I'm curious what impact at all China's rather surprising economic decline recently will have in terms of Russia's economic stability, given the ties between the two countries.
That's a great question. And basically, China is another wild card. If you think China wants Mr. Putin to win this war, China can. China can provide the funds to pay for Putin's budget deficit. China can provide all components he needs to build more weapons. So China can help Putin in a decisive way. So far, China was sitting on the fence, giving Putin something, but not everything. And now, as you rightly said, the slowdown in Chinese economy may change this balance. China can actually start thinking about its own economic prosperity. Recently, one of the things that Putin has already done, China only started to do, China stopped publishing data about youth unemployment. It's a big signal that things are not going well. Youth unemployment was at a record high. We saw that Putin last year and this year has stopped publishing a lot of economic indicators. And that's also a sign that things are not going well. So if China stops supporting Putin, I think that will save a lot of Ukrainian lives.
Something worth noting is that the governor of the Russia Central Bank, Elvira Nabiullina, has been quite crafty in maintaining her ability to keep the Russian economy afloat. She is a well-respected technocrat, and there had been reports in the past that when the war began, she had wanted to leave the country, and Vladimir Putin said she can't. She had also told people previously that if there was any sort of currency manipulation pressed of her, she would resign. That hasn't happened. She has done what has been asked of her, but there is this question about whether the central bank and her role there in the Kremlin are headed toward a collision course. We know what will happen if that's the fact. The Kremlin will be in charge of fiscal policy in Russia. Without someone like Elvira steering the ship, where do you think that could take the country economically?
Well, I'm pretty sure Mr. Putin highly appreciates what the central bank chair, Elvira Nabiullina, and the Minister of Finance, Anton Siluanov, are doing for macroeconomic stability. And so he will not appoint a KGB general to run monetary and fiscal policy. Mr. Putin is smarter than that. He has complete trust in those loyal individuals, as you said, very capable and competent technocrats. So I don't think Mr. Putin is that crazy. I think he will steer the ship in terms of military and geopolitical strategy, but he will leave macroeconomic policy to professionals, which of course is not good. I would just mention that some Elvira's deputies have left the ship in some capacity, but so far, unfortunately, the critical mass of the team is still there. And when you mentioned that ruble is becoming weaker, it's actually part of the game because of Russian economy slowing down and being hit by sanctions. And again, oil revenues being hit by sanctions, and Putin's ability to buy more stuff through third countries creates a disequilibrium in the ruble market. So he has fewer petrodollars and he needs more dollars to buy for important components. That's a normal market force that pressures on ruble to go weaker, and Elvira lets ruble go weaker, and that's completely normal. So this is actually quite a competent decision.
Sergei, in the final seconds that we have here, you were one of the first to suggest that the $300 billion of the Russian central bank assets that had been frozen in the early days of the war should go to help rebuilding Ukraine. They still remain frozen. No decision has been made on that front. Are you disappointed that we haven't seen any movement in that direction yet?
I think nobody has any doubt that Russia will eventually pay for this war. And I should say that every single Russian opposition politician, whether in Russia or abroad, has confirmed that that has to be done. And eventually there will be a court decision, and Russia will be liable for all this horror and harm that it has inflicted on Ukrainians. And so Ukraine will sue Russia, and Ukraine will come with a court warrant to get the money, and eventually it will get this money and probably more if the war continues. Unfortunately, the bill is just growing larger. But indeed, I'm disappointed. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, no, clearly that money could go to good use right now because we've seen a huge decline in Ukraine's economy. No surprise, given the war. Sergei Guriev, thank you so much for your time. It's really good to see you.